Hi, class. My name is Anna Kozlyk, and I am honored to be a part of your class today. I consider it a joy to be able to spend time with students such as yourself around the world and here in town as well, whether it be in person or even over the screen right now. I hope that you could get something out of my discussion. I will be talking about missions. I'm not sure if you know that or not. I think you do. I serve God around the world with World Challenge as the regional coordinator for Europe and Central Asia. I have been traveling for more than 70% of the year last year, and it's my joy and my honor to be able to share some of my stories with you. Before we begin, I would love to just dive into my history for a little bit and tell you why I'm qualified to do what I do, how God has called me, and how I pursued His calling with everything in me. I will start a couple generations back with my grandparents on my father's side and then my grandparents on my mother's side. I was raised in a Ukrainian home. I don't know if you could get that from my last name, Kozlyk, or not. And I considered it an honor to be raised under the persecuted church. My parents were raised in the USSR. In the USSR, the persecution was real. And my grandparents on my dad's side, they they were persecuted. Not so much, but they were. My grandfather was an orphan in World War II. He survived that, and as a result of being orphaned, there have been many things in his life that he has passed down, especially to the men in his family, as well as his brothers that have passed down to their men. And it's it's almost like a generational thing where the men in our families are really hardworking people and have a really strict type of personality. And my dad raised me to be that way as well. He raised me to play my cello. We're all musicians on my dad's side, so I love to praise the Lord. And I've grown up in the church orchestra and the church choir with music as a huge part of my life. Another thing that has impacted my life from the generations back is my mom's side of the family. My grandfather is a martyr on my mom's side. He was killed when my mom was just 22 months old by the KGB for carrying a Bible from one home to the next. I don't know if you know anything about what martyrdom is, but it's when you give your life for Christ. I know that there's a great ministry out there called Voice of the Martyrs that highlights martyrs around the world, even in today's day and age, because it's real. It happens even today. Persecution is something that is going to continue to happen, and because Jesus said, they persecuted me, they will persecute you. The world hated me, they're gonna hate you. However, that's nothing to be afraid of, and I encourage you to keep serving God. He is the ultimate source of strength, joy, hope, peace, and our home ultimately is in heaven, not here. My grandmother was a praying woman on my mom's side who, despite losing her husband, was able to serve the Lord and bring all her kids to know God. My mom passed down that service of the Lord to me, and also a love for prayer. The persecuted church prayed so well in the old USSR. They still do pray all around the world, and I am honored to have been raised to know how to pray alongside them. However, that was not always the case that I liked to pray. About 14, 15, 16, high school ages, I did not really want to go to the Friday night prayer meetings. They were a little bit boring. Mainly older people were there, not many of my friends, and I wanted to hang out with my friends. What normal teenager doesn't want to do that? It was a Friday night, come on. But my mom made me go to prayer instead. One Friday night, I was about 15, there were missionaries that showed up, and those missionaries were from India, and I was captivated. I did not, I've never heard of anything like this, going to a different country to serve the Lord with everything in you, serving the kids and serving the children, serving the neighborhood, parents, adults, anybody and everybody. Uh, they had an orphanage where they would take in kids that have been trafficked or anything. And I absolutely loved hearing the stories. Seeing the photos of the kids that were so vulnerable broke my heart over and over again to pieces that night, and I knew I was called for the missions field. Instead of going to the missions field after high school, I honored my mom and I went to college for a couple years. After that, God gave me a full ride scholarship. How? I have no idea because I never applied for it. And I went to Summit International School of Ministry in a little town of Grantville, Pennsylvania, and I loved every minute of it. There, I got to do an internship in Panama City, Florida, and serve kids around the world and serve kids in my own backyard. That's been my heart and dream. There were children there that were abused. There were children there from the wrong side of the tracks, because that still exists in Florida. And it was our joy. I served alongside an Australian guy and a guy from Puerto Rico, and we combined the youth from the church together with the youth from the wrong side of the tracks, took them on a VBS, or so to say, or high school retreat, and made it our mission to unite all the youth that were coming to our church for the Friday night outreach and the Wednesday night youth group. It was not so popular with the parents, especially the parents that attend the church, to unite the kids from two different backgrounds. But, that's what the church is called to do. We're not called to have a stigma against our neighbors. We're called to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. We are called to love other people as we love ourselves. And after I graduated from Summit International School of Ministry, I went on and got my bachelor's in church ministries. I moved out to Colorado in 2012 to serve at a local church in town for a few years, and now I am serving with World Challenge. At first, I applied just to be the social media director. However, after some time, I moved on from that to applied for a position to travel. My eyes were open to what my team does, and I fell in love with it. It makes sense. So what does my team do? What do I do now? Now I get to travel, make partnerships, encourage my partners, check on the work they're doing, and see what they're doing, participate in their plans, train local communities, train local community leaders, and also just be there as an encouragement, participate in Bible schools, teach in Bible schools around the world, and more. So let me dive in and share some of my core values that I think are very important to what I do. I will start with the very first one. The first one is depending on God. It is God who transforms people, not us. Human strength is just not enough to transform anybody. Our heart is to transform communities as we travel the world, as I'm sure you have already understood that through your reading of the book that Mr. Boucher has given you. I hear that you have read our book that we also are required to read. It's called When Helping Hurts. So we try to help communities around the world by being smart with our relief or development. And we try to do more development than relief in order to empower the people. So we can't empower them on our own. We need the Holy Spirit to empower them. We can't transform communities on our own. We could come and do something good for a week or whatever, but ultimately it's not us. It's God who transforms communities, and it's God whose power we need, it's His provision that we need, and it's His supernatural intervention that we need. Our human efforts are just not enough. I'd love to leave you with a Bible verse about this, and it's found in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. If I could just find it, I will give it to you. It's a trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. It's a great Bible verse for learning what it really means to depend on God. It does not say in there that you're not supposed to have your own plans. He says He will make your plans and your paths straight. You're supposed to be going. We all know the Great Commission. It's a great missiology verse that many people take to heart and memorize. We're all supposed to go and walk, and God will make the rest happen. Trust in Him. Depend on Him. So what's my next core value? My next core value is integration. Like my team, I am committed together with them to obedience to everything that Jesus commanded, including compassion for the physical needs of the people, as well as evangelism and discipleship. We recognize the integral relationship between the physical, mental, social, and spiritual aspects of our lives. You are one person with many different parts to you. However, you are not going to just send your spirit to the church while your physical body stays at home. You are a complete whole person, and our program seeks total development of the whole person and community. We do that by recognizing every part of the person's life. We do not just seek to develop their spiritual side. While that is important and might be the most important side of them because it determines whether they're going to heaven or hell, it's not the only part of them. God cared about our finances. Jesus talked about money plenty of times here on earth. God cared about our health. He talked about how we should, in the Leviticus and law and the Torah, how we should take care of our bodies, what we should do, and more. You know, God also cares about our emotional state. He cares that we do have emotions. He says, be angry, but do not sin. There's so many things that God cares about in our lives that we tend to forget as missionaries, as ministers of the gospel. And I want to encourage you not to forget any part of a person's life, not to forget the fact that sometimes they're hungry. Sometimes people are starving and you're going to their village to build them a building. They don't need that. Teach them how to garden instead. Or listen to what their needs actually are. You might go to a community where they are struggling, the wives and children are struggling with fathers who are alcoholics and abusive, and the children, they don't need another daycare. They don't need another VBS. Yes, while that love is good, it's a temporary fix, and it's not an integral solution, which brings me to the next thing, long-term solutions. Let's think about long-term solutions. Even if we're on a 2-week mission trip, if we're listening to the people, then long-term solutions should be the thing that we're focusing on. We don't come from the West as a good youth group to help a community just because it's going to look good on our resume, or it's going to be a lot of fun going with your friends and your youth group or your youth leader, and that's not the purpose of missions. We're supposed to be working together and focusing on long-term solutions. You know, if we're not focused on the long term, then why are we going? In a week, they're going to be hungry again. The aid that you gave them today, in a month, it will be gone. What are you doing? We concentrate on our efforts on long-term solutions that break the cycle of poverty and disease. We equip people to do for themselves through training and mentorship. We focus on development rather than relief, and disease prevention rather than cure. Which brings me to the Bible verse in Matthew chapter 28. It says that we're supposed to go and teach, right? So teaching takes time. Teaching is not something where you just go preach a sermon and walk away. Walk alongside people. Jesus walked alongside his disciples for 3 years. To make a disciple takes time. To teach takes time. Otherwise, you're just going to go do for someone, and in a month, in a year, they'll be hungry again. There will be disease there again, and there will be poverty there again. What's the next core value? The fourth core value is local ownership and initiative. We seek sustainable programs that are owned by the people and built on local initiative. Ownership and initiative is demonstrated through volunteerism and strengthened through capacity building. We take time in communities to participate with the people in assessing their needs, identifying resources, and assisting them in organizing for action through training and consultation. You know, if the local people do not own their own development or their own ministries, then why are we there? What is happening, really? We're going to leave, we're going to get tired, and it's going to fall apart. It's supposed to be locally owned. You know, nobody is at home holding your hand to make sure that you're brushing your teeth if you want your teeth to stay in. If you want to stay healthy, if you want to keep educating yourself, nobody's gonna watch over your shoulder to make sure that you're truly listening and paying attention instead of doodling or doing whatever you want. And if they are, they're gonna get tired one day. They're gonna move on. They're not gonna be there forever. What are you gonna do then? And the same for ministries around the world. People are gonna leave. I'm gonna leave. I come back to the USA. I'm not gonna stay there forever. Missionaries that go on the mission field do not stay there forever. They all come back to the USA for furlough or sometimes even permanently. As God leads, as God directs, the local people will stay and they will remain. Are we equipping them? Are we thinking long term? Are we thinking that they are capable of locally owning their own development, their own initiatives, their own projects in their community? They're capable. Parents care for the next generation. Are we teaching the parents what it means to send the child to school and the opportunities that the child will have if they prioritize that? You know, there was a community in Africa where they wanted to send the children to school, but there was no school, and we wanted to come alongside them. But if we had come and just built a school, really, who would have gone? And instead, the church and the community and the parents, they're all like, all right, we will give just a little. And they gave what they could. Every month they would give $1 or $2, and that's a lot for them. And now they have a teacher that's supported on their own salary, and they have slowly built the school with their own resources. And we've come alongside and said, you're doing something locally on your own. We could help a little as well. So I think that's the way it should be. So what's the fifth core value? Participatory learning. We believe people must be active participants in their own development. Therefore, we use methods for adult learning that engage participants in a process of reflection and action. We also believe that people learn by doing, and that modeling is essential. You know, participatory learning means that we don't just go and teach, because then otherwise we're owning it. We're the ones that are smarter than them. And we're not really restoring dignity either to the people. So we believe that participatory learning is important. It restores dignity when you ask someone a question that honors them and asks for their history. What was in your community 5 years ago? How has your community changed? How do you think you could help change your community in the future? It gives them something to think about. It gives them a sense of, I'm the one that's participating in this, instead of us just coming and teaching and not listening. We have to listen a little bit more as well. There's that old, I don't know what it's called, an old proverb. We all have two ears and one mouth. So let's listen a little bit more to the local people and help them participate in their learning and in their development. It's a great core value to have. So that was fifth core value. Let's move on to the sixth, one of my favorites. It's multiplication. Our aim is not merely projects, but multiplication. This is facilitated by training people to train others using concepts that are transferable. We emphasize the use of local resources and appropriate technologies so that solutions can be passed along neighbor to neighbor. We build cooperation and vision at a community level. We work collaboratively with faith and community-based organizations, local and international relief and development agencies, churches, and missions, as well as governments, to facilitate the transformation of communities and nations. You know, multiplication means that what I am going to teach you, you could take now and go teach somebody else as well. And this is a fruit that is supposed to be evident. Otherwise, what are we doing? You know, our heart and our desire as we travel the world is to befriend and build relationship with people and disciple them to disciple others. Jesus modeled it really well. He had 12 disciples, and then he said, now go and make more disciples, starting here and moving on. And that is what we seek to do as well. We seek to make disciples of all nations slowly and by building relationship. After 5-10 years, if there's no multiplication, if neighbors in the community have not recognized changes, then what are we really doing there? Is there really fruit? You know, the Bible says that you shall know them by their fruit. I think this is true for multiplication. If the quote that perception is reality, it's true. Perception is reality. While you might think that you are doing good, you love God, you're serving Him, if there is no fruit, if there is no discipling, or if there is nothing like that happening, are you really serving? Are you really doing the right thing? What is happening? And we don't give up on people easily. We try to walk with them, ask, inquire. They could be serving in a tough place. They could be serving in a country that has only got like less than 3% Christians. They could be serving in a country that is closed, and it's a completely different situation. So there is also understanding with multiplication. It's not a strict, we must see this many people multiply or this many disciples by the next year. That's not what multiplication is about. Multiplication is about God growing the fruit, giving us the increase. One sows, another reaps, and God is the one who gives the increase. So let's move on to the very last core value, and that's the seventh, partnering with the church. One that I also find that's very important. Jesus describes the church as his body and bride. Local churches are his chosen instrument for his involvement in the world. When the local church acts, God receives the glory rather than the praise going to an individual or an organization. That's why the church is key to addressing brokenness. You know, if you come to a community and do good and evangelize to a group of people and then leave, Where are those people that have just been reached going to go to church? Who's going to continue to mentor them, and who's going to continue to disciple them in their faith? You most likely will not stay in touch with the people that you met on your 2-week missions trip, except for maybe one person for a short while. You might forget about them afterwards. You might remember them, but you won't remember to keep in touch. It's very hard to do with people from different countries and communities around the world. With that, we believe that we have to partner with the local church. Have them lead the initiative. Have them understand the need for integral ministry in their community. Jesus has modeled what integral ministry is, and he has also modeled what it means to lead in a community, in a local community. He served all over in his country, and likewise, we have to respect the fact that he has called people to different places. Apostle Paul was called to the Gentiles. Peter was called to the Jews. And so likewise, we're all called to different places, and let's honor the people in their places. They still fellowshipped together. They still saw one another. If you read through the book of Acts, yeah, there were arguments or whatnot, but we're still supposed to respect one another in our callings and in our places where God has planted us. It's something that will serve to benefit the church when we're not trying to take away from somebody else, but rather give God the glory. When we go to a different community and we're the ones serving or whatnot, we have to recognize there was a church there first. We're not the ones who came and did it and all of a sudden it's cleaned up because you've arrived. There's probably been an elderly lady that's been praying in the church, a prayer warrior that's been living on her knees, praying to God for the community first, and praying that God would send someone or do something, and you arrived. So it's not you. It's not me. It's not that little lady. It's God. The local church serves to glorify God, and let's work together with them. There's a lot of different things that I could talk about, and I would love to share a few stories of some of the work that I've been a part of, some of the work in seeing the poor. In Europe, I have been working with the Roma, and the Roma are poor and marginalized people, and I have a commitment to them. I have a heart to see them rise up out of the poverty that they live in, that they have chosen to live in generation after generation, and ultimately it's become such a part of them that they don't know any different or how to escape from it seems. Pastor Sergey from Ukraine, he said, he said that there's this quote that they use in their culture, says, "I am stupid because I am poor. I am poor because I am stupid." It's a harsh word to say about yourself. He is poor. He does rely on resources from the outside, or he has to cross the border to go to Hungary or Czech or another country to work, because there's no work in Ukraine for the Roma. It seems that they have to either collect tin or sell Band-Aids on the street corners or beg for money. However, the men have to leave the country for work if they want to have a little bit more income. And it's a sad thing. It's a sad thing to see the poverty that's really there that many people forget about. It's hard to process seeing homes without doors, without heating, without windows, children running around that are completely dirty. And people forget that this is in Europe. This is all over. While Pastor Sergey's village is just one example, this is in Bulgaria as well, where they just built communities on top of trash pits. And it's just dirty. It's completely filthy, walking the streets and seeing little girls just running around, and little boys, just the boys naked half the time. And Excuse me. I'm back. It changed my life. Seeing the communities choose to live in the rundown homes. The government built apartments right next to their community for them to move into. They don't know what to do in those apartments, so they move back into their homes. You can't just tell someone to live in a better place. They have to start locally owning their own development, their own desire to move out of the situation as well. And they have to actively participate in learning why it's important to move into a home instead of live in the slum like that. I have seen just mothers who are hungry and begging on the streets for money, but if you give them money for today, tomorrow they're going to be hungry again. Really, what is it going to do to help them? How are they going to learn? There was a community that my partners did work in for a while already, and the little old ladies, the older ladies in the community came together, and they're like, we're gonna open up the community center and start feeding the children once or twice a week, a hot meal, and afterwards we're also going to spend time with them, teaching them English and more. This has been an incredible blessing to this community, and it's empowered them so much. Some of the youth that has risen up in this community are now serving as worship leaders in the local church and participating in missions conferences, and also traveling around Albania and other countries to encourage and equip other Roma that are marginalized on the edge of town. Another story I would love to share with you is Sasha from Bosnia. He's been volunteering with a community for a number of years, and he has a young guy who's about 22, Jonathan, that has been on the border all the time. He comes from a really rough family background where his mom is not a Christian. They would say that she is either a witch or something, and they come from a Muslim background, and they were saved one by one. Jonathan was always on the fence. He would come for a while and disappear for a couple months, come again, disappear. Last fall, I was able to walk Sasha through a time of development project that he implemented in that community, and he let Jonathan take the lead on that. He entrusted a local person who some might say was not qualified, but empowering a local person to do their own development really empowered Jonathan, and in turn impacted his family. Now his family is asking questions and seeking truth, including his mother. So that's a testimony that I will never forget. Jonathan, through his faithfulness to grow under and be entrusted by Sasha, was eye-opening to everyone in the community and all of his family. Another story I'd love to share with you comes from a community in Central Asia. We were there training them and telling them, hey, listen, let's think about how we could help make our communities better, how we could serve our communities with small things called acts of love. Those acts of love are often done by outside missionaries, 2-week missions trips, right? However, this guy, as he's listened to acts of love, he's like, I'm gonna go love my community. After this training, within a week, he got together in his community with a few leaders, and where he used to live, there was just a road, the main road, and it was just full of trash. You could not walk down the street without stepping on trash. There was so much of it. So they brought in dirt and cleared it out and covered it up, and now they're the street looks completely clean. And he put a committee in place together with the community leaders, and there's a committee that keeps the street clean. This is something that was locally initiated, locally owned. Otherwise, you would come clean it up if you're coming as a church group or a missionary group, and in a year you have to come and clean it up again. What's the point of doing that? Why are you doing it that way? We have to use a lot of creativity when we reach out to students and when we reach out to kids overseas, sometimes in different countries. And there is a ministry that does outreach through doing healthcare. They go to communities with tuberculosis or whatnot and serve the community by loving the people that are unloved, the poor, poorest of the poor, the marginalized, the sickest of the sick, the untouchables. Same way Jesus did it. Jesus modeled it first. He went and he touched the people with leprosy. He was not afraid. He was not afraid of the poor. He was not afraid of the marginalized. However, if we're just going to be giving to the poor just to feed them for a day, Jesus was smart. He said, the poor will be with you always. They're always going to be around. There's always going to be somebody that's poor. And our resources, they're not ours. They're God's. And for us to just share them freely without seeking some kind of development or seeking to honor God in that, it's almost foolishness. It's classified as foolishness. It's God's resources. And resources, I'm not sure if you understand this or not, but there's a chapter in the book that talks about asset-based community resources. Every community has resources. And sometimes we come in from the outside and just give our resources thinking we're doing good. And it causes so much more harm than good. We come in with a bunch of shoes to Africa, and now the local African shoemaker is out of business because we have donated all these shoes from the West. Which in turn, he's now out of business. He can't feed his family. There's another family that's born on the streets. And now they're depending on our resources instead of the asset-based community resources. He was the resource that should have been partnered with to give away free shoes. Likewise, we go and give free food. We've created such a problem in Haiti where they rely on rice from other countries now because the local rice farmers, they can't compete with free rice that's been donated from USA or other countries. And now it's a problem. All these farmers are out of business. What are they supposed to be doing? I've been privileged to see communities that have taken this to the next level, communities that have really implemented asset-based community development and started initiating their own little small changes. They together bought a goat for one family, and after that goat has a couple kids, the kids will be shared. One will stay with the family, the next will go to the community again, and another family will be chosen to be blessed. Same with the resources that we're trying to teach the people how to pull together. As the people pull together a community bank and start trusting one another and discussing an open dialogue, this money, they'll be accountable to each other. They'll start a little farm, and after a season, hopefully they'll get all their profit back. And that's exactly what happened with Jonathan. He was able to get all the profit back for the chicken project that he was entrusted with. And not only was he able to return the initial investment, he had a profit on top of that. And that's what inspired his family around him to come and see what we're really about. We're not about keeping the resources to ourselves. Now this profit is used, and they're trying to expand their chicken farm, and now they have a couple geese as well on their little farm. It's something that's an honor to see and be a part of. It's an honor to see people around the world, even today, amidst and all of this COVID crisis, still seek a way out through development and through loving their neighbors as themselves. So I want to encourage all of you, love your neighbor as yourself. Don't be afraid to share all of you with all of them. By that I mean, don't be afraid to teach them about emotional care. Don't be afraid to teach them about physical care. Missions is not supposed to just be about the spiritual side of things. While that's the most important thing about a person's life, it's not the only thing that matters. Jesus fed 5,000. Jesus fed people multiple times. He fed Peter on the shore. He fed another group of people. I think that was 7,000 the other time. Jesus talked about money. Jesus talked about so much more than just the kingdom of heaven. While that was his most important message, that's not all he talked about. And let us not forget to love people the same exact way that he loved us. Be blessed.